Wow, I can't believe Deji left this place open once again. Getting inside this time was way too easy, even compared to last time. Well, this gives me an opportunity to actually test my plans for the future, but while I'm at it, it seems that I did have unfinished business, so why not give a bit of a show at the camera while we're at it? Much better. Well, it looks like I wasn't present here from the beginning, so why not? Let's give my accounts to the products where I wasn't technically in. As a field of reference, while I did watch the movie recently as a refresher, one of them I had not until this point, that would be Mewtwo Returns. And since I'm working with limited resources here, my choices will be probably something that was picked by the others in terms of repetition. But don't worry, my input will still be personal enough. Also, of course, no recap, might as well the others did it. So let's start with the first movie, please. Pokemon, the first movie. Okay, I did not see this movie in theaters, but I remember seeing the marketing. It was all over the place, particularly posters when it was advertised for cinema. As I mentioned in the past sporadically, my parents did prohibited me to see the series, so this was not really, an exception, of course. I ended up seeing the movie later at a friend's house, and it was a decent enough time back then, but it lacked the full context about the things that were cut off, the dubs, differences, and so on. But let's start with the bullet points, shall we? Worst character. This one is pretty straightforward to me. Brock, simply put, barely does anything in his movie. I could be wrong, and maybe he contributes a bit into operating a mechanism here and there towards the climax, but otherwise he pretty much is the load of the team, especially because he doesn't even have Pokemon that are ideal for traversing the water. Ash and Misty have to do basically all the job. So yeah, again, pretty straightforward. Best character. At the cost of being a basic beach option, this one is just a fan favorite, mostly because you can tell that the movie was centered entirely around Mewtwo. The creators tried to, make sure that everything worked in his favor, and it's for the best. His backstory is tragic, his plight understandable, but at the same time he's still committing villainous action, so there is a decent enough balance to make Mewtwo charismatic and interesting. Next. Worst scene. Oh boy, look, I get where the movie was going, but it feels very manipulative, especially with the whole tears of a Pokemon that will heal petrification, especially because Ash is invested by two beams of light. They are clearly supposed to atomize someone, but instead he's turned to stone because, we can't show a character dead like that in a kid's movie. Which is weird because later movies will have slightly more graphical depiction of Ash dying, between him almost drowning in Temple of the Sea and him being absorbed by one of the, blobs in Lucario and the Mystery of Mew. So I get the idea it was just an early attempt and the animators were not entirely sure if they were allowed to go through. My point still stands though that it feels way too manipulative for its own good, and sure it might work for little kids, but it still feels cheap. Best scene. That being said, what happens up until that point is kinda cool actually. The way the clones fight with their original Pokemon, especially Mewtwo versus Mew, it really is a good time. It really is, that kind of DBZ type of fighting that people genuinely love when they see, a shonen anime. So, again, the animators, the score, everything works with what it's supposed to be, and then it's ruined by the aforementioned Ash death scene and Mew's horrible speech about eugenics, where it's just terrible out of nowhere, and really the movie could benefit without it. Jeez. Final thoughts and score. Okay, like I said, while I don't have a nostalgic attachment to this movie as many people would have, I understand that as a first attempt it's still relatively solid enough, but we're just not getting there quite yet to a completely good product and something that would be completely solid. So I'm not in all consciousness giving it a bigger positive vote, especially also because it has a lot of dumb decisions like the cutting of scenes, weird jokes like the Minnesota Vikings reference, which by the way in my country's dub they actually did not use it because probably someone understood that it was very dumb, just saying. And the aforementioned Ash's death manipulative scene, it really just almost shoots the climax in its foot. That being said, the animation is very good, especially for early OVAs compared to the series. The score, at least the original, is very solid, and the themes treated on a general level are not too bad, especially for a Pokemon movie. This is also one of the few products where they try to still be closer in a way to the games by having someone genuinely trying to catch Mewtwo with a Pokeball. Sadly, it doesn't work, and then the movie starts to apply its own kind of rules, but alas, what can I do about it? So for the score, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. I probably should be having close to a 5.5, but the animation bumps it just enough to scrape to the bare minimum sufficient to me. Next movie. Pokemon 2000. Okay, this one I actually went to see it in theaters, believe it or not. It wasn't a complete super, ecstatic experience. It was more of a case of the local Sunday school was actually having a theater on its own, and they were, showcasing a bunch of movies, and one of them was Pokemon 2000, since it had come out relatively recent. And surprisingly enough, my parents were actually okay with me seeing this, mostly because I was in with friends basically, so they were having the mentality of, theories with people that we know, so we're gonna have to, trust that. That being said, even if I have still a positive opinion of the movie these days, it's not sadly without flaws, and I'm pretty sure the others have mentioned during the commentary, but let's go one by one. Worst character. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Lawrence III in this. It's a shame because this guy has the potential to be super cool. He has a majestic type of airship, he's very imposing, he has the power to back up his word, but he's a complete wimp. We know barely about his backstory, only that he found the Ancient Mew card, which was given as a promotional material for the movie, and that he wants to collect the 3 sacred birds and then, Lugia just because. He lacks that kind of extra punch that later villains like the one of Pokemon Forever will have. This is just still an early attempt. We're getting close to having one that is, just that great, that is not a Pokemon but just a human being, it's not associated with an evil team, but it's sadly not there enough, and as such is the worst character. I'm not conscious not giving this one to Misty. I understand about the whole burden line, which, has its own negative connotations and everything, but in all consciousness I cannot really, put her in this spot, sorry. Best character. And continuing the weird decisions, I'm gonna put Tracy in this one. Yeah, I'm one of the few people who genuinely like him. I understand the connotation of the fact that he replaced Brock, and as a result, people will see him more for what he represents rather than the person that he is. But I honestly genuinely like him. He's curious, he loves to study, he loves to do research, and despite being a bug primarily trainer, like he said in the past, he managed to tame a Cypher. That is really grounded enough to consider him as badass enough in my book, if you ask me. And the movie actually has him having decent enough moments, which were sadly completely exciting in the dub for no particular reason other than to make him dumber, and as a result it fuels the narrative of Tracy's bad, Brock was better, which is kinda sad. But otherwise, I genuinely like Tracy. For the record, since I haven't mentioned him yet, I don't think Ash was the worst thing in this movie. The whole predestination was still dumb, and by the way, the whole prophecy of the world turning to Ash, my country did not even bother to localize it, they just bothered to translate it like it was, and basically confirm that instead of having a pun, the world will actually look into a person that was called Ash. Which, honestly, might as well, you know, instead of having just a stupid pun going around. Next. Worst scene. Yeah, speaking of the worst character, again, Lawrence III had this great opportunity of being a very competitive and fearsome type of trainer that could be a dent in the works of everyone else, because maybe he had better research, he had access to special type of Pokeball on his own that could help him, but no, instead he cheats using weird technology that doesn't even capture the legendary Mons, and instead traps them in these electrical fences, which are mostly torture devices, and when Misty rightfully asks him about, why is he doing this, he just says that he loves to collect them. Dude! Ask about making Master Balls to the Silph Company if you really want to. It's that easier than constructing all of this bullshit. And once again, because we don't have the full scope of his lore, aside from the Ancient Mewtwo card, we really don't get the full extent of why he will be doing this. It's just a waste of potential and a dumpification of a character that could have been super cool. Best scene. That being said, I will say that the best thing to me is the escape from the airship from Ash and Company in the Japanese version. Technically not much is changed, but just for the sake of fairness. The idea of everyone using their Pokemon to break the containment fields of the legendary birds is a neat idea. It shows a bit of a teamwork. And it was also partially Tracy's idea, which is why I'm mentioning the Japanese version, because that's one of the things that gets excised in the dub for no adequate reason. But overall, the scene is smart, clever, and everyone is using their Pokemon for a proper type of problem solving. Even if it's not a proper fight, it still works technically. It's very clever, and I genuinely like it as a result. Final thoughts and score. Okay, now with this I do have nostalgic BS, so my score technically will probably be a bit higher than it objectively needs to be, but I cannot help it. I still really like this movie overall, despite its flaws. The animation is still relatively good, and the music okay, but what hampers it down for the most part is again the lackluster human villain, the whole prophecy angle, which is stupid as a whole in general, and the fact that the Pokemon that, are gathered through this cosmic event do not even bother to help, as I'm sure the others have mentioned of their own. That being said, I'm still gonna give this one a 7 out of 10, probably closer to a 6.5, but 7 is still is due to nostalgic BS. Deal with it. Last movie. Pokemon Mewtwo Returns. Oh boy, this one I saw it only recently as an obligation because I never seen it until this point, and man, it felt like I wasted my time as a result. No kidding, as a sequel to the first movie, a direct sequel nonetheless, it's a disappointment to say the least, especially because it tries to fill in the gaps of plot points that were established in the first movie but never followed, namely, why didn't Giovanni do anything after Mewtwo escaped? This is the movie that answers that, and it's a snooze fest at best, but let's get to the different points. Worst character. Yeah, conversely to the first movie, I'm gonna say that Mewtwo is the worst character in this one to me. It's just a disappointment compared to how he was characterized in the first movie. In here, he's a selfish bastard that probably doesn't know better than what to do for him and the clones, and it takes the entire movie to realize that, hey, maybe they should be allowed to make their own decisions, and if it's a problem for me, I'll just stay alone and decide for myself. Sure, he's cool enough in the fight scenes, but that doesn't not even enough to save his characterization. I'm sorry, it's really a downgrade. Best character. I'm using this only as a technicality because I wouldn't consider any character the best in the movie, more on that when it comes to the best scene, but I'm gonna say Giovanni, mostly because it showcases how competent it is. If there's one thing that this movie proves that maybe it will showcase also a bit in the series, but not as strong until this point, is that outside of Jesse James and Meow, the rest of Team Rocket is scarily competent if they put their minds into it, and with Giovanni at the lead, it does showcase. I'm still not a big fan of Ted Lewis' delivery for Giovanni. I would expect something deeper, a bit like Patrick Sides on Jameson Pierce, but this was fine for what he wanted to do. Worst scene. I'm gonna use this to count as a whole general character stupidity, but singling out two things in particular. One, the scene in which Ash and his company are trapped behind bars during the climax, and apparently, despite the bars being very flimsy, and them having a bunch of Pokemon that can easily break them down, like Onix or Gyarados, they don't do anything to actually break them, they have to wait until they are broken out by someone else. And second, a little scene where Ash and Brock are constantly body checking the robots of Team Rocket, and only way later are realizing, wait, Pikachu can use Thundershock, let's make him do the job for us. In general, this movie seems to have regressed to having characters that are not using their brain cells in almost any capacity, and is particularly noticeable for Ash and his company, not to the point of being the worst characters. Apparently in the Black and White series Ash is much worse, but it was still very frustrating. Best scene. This is also another technicality, like choosing Giovanni as the best character, but I'm gonna go with Domino basically flexing towards Jesse, James, and Meow. Look, as we noticed also, Team Rocket as a whole, as in the trio of Team Rocket, gets progressively worse and has less things to do with each movie. But this movie kinda showcases to me that there is potential to still making it threatening villains with Team Rocket, and Domino is a good case of that. Sure, it might be a bit extremely telegraphed and on the nose, but it is a breath of fresh air compared to the bumbling trio, and possibly a precursor when it came to the anime to stuff like Hunter J as a result. So she is a bit of a saving grace. Not enough for her to be the best character, but at least the scenes where she's flexing towards the main trio is solid enough to me to include in this. Final thoughts and score. Yeah, I'm not gonna be too charitable to this. The animation is technically a downgrade, the score is just fine even if part of it at least is recycled. The plot starts interesting enough, but then it peters off and farts at the end. And the characters are just a downgrade compared to the first movie. I'm gonna be generous and give this one a 4.5 out of 10. This is just not a good movie. Not the worst. I will still take this over Forever and Heroes, but I will take still Legend of Thunder over this. And no one can convince me otherwise, I'm sorry. And I think that's kinda it. I think I'm caught up with the rest of the guys. Which does remind me, I'm almost done with the preparations. I just need to try one little thing. Alright, speak.
Hi, my name is Digimon11, and Pokemon Journeys is my favorite series of all time.
Yeah, that sounds good enough to me. What? Wait a minute. What is that? What? Teji, leaving an unused Master Ball in plain sight in your place? You really shouldn't have. This definitely is speeding things up considerably for my plan. But first, I think we need to go to church for our next movie, so I'm gonna take my chances and wait a bit before striking. But rest assured, audience, you'll be able to see soon enough.